Okay, great. Let's get going. Let's go ahead and find measures for our two-dimensional shapes like circumference, areas, and perimeters. So our first shape here is a circle. And just to always be sure, I like to put the radius and the diameter first. So the diameter was 12, so we know the radius had to be 6. Now, to find the circumference here, all right, the formula, we always write the formula first. Circumference equals pi times the diameter, all right? So we replace pi with 3.14, and the diameter was 12. And when we multiply, we get 37.68, and that would be inches. That's a one-dimensional unit, all right? And again, let's go ahead and put our radius and our diameter here for the second circle. On this one, they give us the radius, which is 32, so that means the diameter had to be 64. Now we're looking for the area of the circle, so the formula for area is pi times radius squared. I like to put my parentheses first, so I'm replacing pi with 3.14, and we said the radius was 32. So just like order of operations, we want to square that 32 first. That comes out to 1,024. Now we have 3.14 times 1,024, and that gets us 3,215 and 3,600 centimeters. Now make sure you square the unit. Area is two-dimensional, so that means we have centimeters squared. All right, our next shape here is a triangle. And we have the lengths 8, 5, and 12. They haven't given us the right angle, but we can go ahead and put the right angle symbol in there. So we know once we've done that, we know one of these sides that it touches has to be the length, and the other one would be its height. All right? Now, we're only finding the perimeter for this shape. So the perimeter would have just been side plus side plus side. So that would be 8 plus 5 plus 12. 8 plus 5 would be 13 plus 12, and that would be 25 feet. All right? Now, if we were doing the area, let's go ahead and just do that down here. The formula for area of a squared is 1/2, and we're going to go ahead and use the decimal form, a half, the base times the height. So we know that one of these is the base and one is the height. So let's call this the base, and we'll call 8 the height. So let's just replace our variables now. The base we said was 12, and the height was 8. And when we multiply that out, we are going to get 48, and that would be feet squared. Great. All right, let's try. Notice this is a different kind of triangle. Our first one was a right triangle. This one here, we have a length of 6 yards here, 18 yards. And so this is not a right triangle, but they've given us this vertical line in the middle, so we know that's where our right angle would be. So again, if we draw that right angle symbol, connect our little arrows, we know that one of these lines is the base and the other one is the height. So let's go ahead and name this our base, and we can name 8 as our height. So to calculate, all right, formula for area for a triangle is 1/2 the base times the height. So the base we decided was going to be the 18, and the height was the 8. And when we multiply that out, it comes out to 72 yards squared. All right, moving along with our next shape down here. Since they have given us 19 meters and no other measurements here, we would assume that all of these sides are congruent and that this is a square. So perimeter, since this is a square, the formula for perimeter would be 4 times the sides, since they are all congruent. So we would have 4 times 19, and 4 times 19 comes out to 76 meters. Area for a square, this one here, let's do that. Again, they've only given us one measure, so the assumption is this is a square and all sides are equal to 5 1/2. So the area for the square would be side squared. So the measure for a side is 5.5. So since this is in fraction form, we're going to change this to 11/2, and we're going to square that. 11/2 times 11/2, and that's 121/4. And when we simplify, we end up with 30 1/4 centimeters squared for area. Great. Next type of two-dimensional shape we're going to talk about is our parallelogram. And here in the parallelogram, we see that this length is 17. So that means the top line would be 17 since this is a parallelogram. The side measure is 23, so this side measure over here also has to be 23 for our parallelogram. So we can call this the formula for perimeter 2a plus 2b. We could call 17a, and the side that's 23, we could call that b. So if we have 2 times 17 plus 2 times 23, we'll end up with 34 plus 46 for a perimeter of 80 millimeters. All right, now trying our hand at finding the area of a parallelogram. For the area of the parallelogram, remember that area equals b times, whoops, that's an h. And remember that the b stands for the base, all right? So this is base times the height. Now that means we have to go back and find our right angle, and they've given us the line here. So we draw a right angle symbol, and whatever two lines, that's telling us one of those is the base and the other is the height. And so if we substitute our values here, we see that the base was 17 and the height was 19. And when we multiply those numbers out, we get 323 millimeters squared. All right, our next two-dimensional shape here is a rectangle. And so again, if it's 5.34 feet on the bottom, it's 5.34 on the top, and the right side then would be 2.12 feet since the left side. So for perimeter, we can have perimeter equals 2 times the length plus the width. And so we would substitute the length was 5.34 and the width was 2.12. Go ahead and simplify our parentheses, so that comes to 7.46. And when we simplify, that comes out to 14.92 feet. And now the area of a rectangle, area just equals length times width. And so we have 5.4 times 9.34, and those numbers are interchangeable. And you end up with 50.436 kilometers square for the area of that rectangle. All right. Now we have a trapezoid. And again, the perimeter of any shape is just the sum of its sides. Since this has 4 sides, we're just going to substitute our s as our placeholder. So we would have 2 plus 18 plus another 2 over here plus 24 on the bottom. And when we add those up, we end up with 46 centimeters. All right. Now, the area for a trapezoid is a little more complicated. So let's go ahead and write that out. So area equals 1/2, all right, the height, times base 1 plus base 2 in parentheses. So let's go back to our shape and designate our areas. Here is our vertical line that is not part of the trapezoid but gets us to that right angle so we can figure out which one is the base and the height. Well, our bases have to be parallel to each other. So the two sides that are parallel is this 6 and the 13. So in this case, this would be the base here, and your 5 inches would be the height. So when we substitute our values, we would have the height would have been 5, and our two bases would have been 6 and 13. And so when we simplify that, we get 0.5 times 5 times 19, and that gets us 47.5 inches squared for the area of that trapezoid. All right, now our last shape on here is what we call a complex figure or an irregular figure. In other words, it's a composite of some other shapes. So if we look at this shape here, all right, we can break this down into a triangle, and we have a rectangle, and at the bottom we have a trapezoid. So the easiest thing to do is to first write the formulas for each of those shapes. So a triangle is 1/2 the base times the height. Rectangle is length times width, all right? And a trapezoid formula is 1/2 the height, base 1 plus base 2. So now let's go find our values to substitute for all of our variables. So this 4 is referring to the vertical line there, which would be the height of the triangle. If it is 3 down here at the base of this rectangle, that means this segment here is also 3. So the formula for our triangle, the base was 3 and the height was 4. Now our rectangle, here's our 10 and our 3. So 10 times 3. And here we have the 2 is referring to that vertical line there. So that would be our height. So we would have 0.5 times 2, and our two bases are 3 and 5. And when we simplify the sum for our triangle, that comes to 6. The rectangle is 30. And when we simplify this, 8 times 2 is 16 times 1/2 is 8. And we sum that up, and that would be 40 inches squared. All right, thanks for checking in for measurement of two-dimensional shapes.